So in today's parsha, we learn an interesting concept that what we could understand something properly takes us 40 years to learn. Only 40 years later we could get it. And now our parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu, reminds the Jewish people the miracles that he did with us when we left Egypt and the 40 years in the desert. And it says, in all these 40 years, Hashem didn't give you the heart to understand and the eyes to see and your ears to hear, till today. Moshe Rabbeinu says this to the Jewish people when it was 40 years when they left Egypt. They were standing by the borders of Israel. 40 years after they left Egypt, so the rabbis, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the Gemara says that a person cannot reach really the understanding of his rabbis, of his rabbi's teaching. Not rabbis, it's a rav. It's till he gets till 40 years. Over here we have to understand this is not just a teacher. We're talking about somebody who is teaching in a higher level, in a different world. So there is Pshat, Remesh, Drush, Sod. So in the world there is this physical world and there's the spiritual world, Asiya, Yetzirah, Brea, Atzilus. A real teacher is somebody who understands things on a much higher level. And when he is teaching, to really understand him takes 40 years. That's what the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people, only now you got the ability, the heart to understand, the eyes to see, and the ears to hear. The whole 40 years since then, you did not manage. Therefore, now I'm demanding from you, as Moshe Rabbeinu continues, Ushemartem es divrei Rabbi says, you should be careful to keep the whole Torah. As Rashi says, that till today Hashem wasn't so careful with you. He wasn't upset when you did something wrong. But from now on further, he will, because now you understand. Now he was not so hikpid. He wasn't so strict, wasn't getting upset. Now he will be stricter because now it's 40 years. Now you had the ability to understand what Hashem, what Moshe Rabbeinu teaches you. So now it's much more serious.
Buckle up.
So the Rebbe is asking a question. If a person needs 40 years to understand the depth of the meaning, how can Moshe Rabbeinu count things that happened before the 40 years, as we see, for instance, Milchem Sichen Ve'eid, or the giving them the other side of the Yarden to Bnei Reuven, Bnei Gad. How is Moshe Rabbeinu dealing with things that didn't pass by yet 40 years? Also, we have to understand Divrei Habris, the covenant that Hashem makes between the Jewish people and God. If a person that the Jewish people have to keep it goes into in the words that it wasn't 40 years, but it was in the years in the desert, till things that are said just in the 40th year. So they're just said. Now you need 40 years to grasp them. Why in that case Hashem will be upset and worry on things that said now, but 40 years didn't pass yet? And they didn't have the chance yet to understand it, these aspects that was just said lately. So we'll understand it when we'll understand what does it mean? You need 40 years to understand. A person cannot understand really the way of thinking of his teacher 40 years. How can you make that rule? There are different students with different talents, and different talents in brain, different talents in soul. Someone will take 40 years, somebody's going to do it faster. How come Torah says 40 years for everybody? How's that? But what the Rebbe explains, in learning, there is two parts. There is the details that the teacher teaches his students, and then there is the way of learning, the approach, general approach, how the teacher explains things. The way the teacher is learning, that he doesn't teach clearly. This is only when the student is learning the teachings of his Rebbe, then finally he gets to the depth and the way he learns, the way he does. That means Daite Shel Rabbi. What does it mean? That the Gemara says, takes 40 years, Lamet al Daite Shel Rabbi, to stand on the understanding, on the way of thinking of his teacher. Not the detailed piece that he taught you. That detailed piece you could understand. But to understand his approach, to understand why is he learning this way and that way, that usually the rabbi doesn't teach you. That takes you 40 years to understand where is he coming from. Why is he taking this approach? What do we learn from the miracles? We'll soon see, we'll finish the sikha and then we'll go. The meaning is not that it needs 40 years to understand every little detail that the rabbi says. No. After 40 years, now the student is already standing on the path and understands the approach of his teacher. Now, when he hears new things, he could understand it much faster. It doesn't need 40 years anymore. Because he now got already the way the rabbi is teaching. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people. Now it's 40 years that you are close to God, to His Torah and to His miracles. You already have the heart to understand, the eyes to see, and the ears to hear. In other words, till now you would not be able to appreciate, to understand, to hear, to recognize what it is. But now you're already, 40 years, you already could reach the understanding your teacher. Therefore now, take mine words of our covenant to heart, because now you're going to be responsible for it. Because now you could already understand it. Even so, you hear it just today. You don't need another 40 years. From here is given the ability to Jewish people, the ability to learn instructions, in other words, to learn how to behave from the miracles and everything Hashem did to them when they left Egypt and all 40 years in the desert, and become stronger through this in keeping Torah and mitzvahs. So the summary, we're talking a teacher like Moshe Rabbeinu that didn't just taught to the Jewish people because they didn't know exactly the translation of the word, they didn't know exactly the meaning of the word, so he taught them. He taught them that as well. But the main thing, Moshe Rabbeinu, usually a teacher, a real teacher like Moshe Rabbeinu, doesn't give the people only what they could understand. He is giving them what he understands. Otherwise, he's not teaching them. He's just giving them like a teacher gives a 5-year-old. By the way, they say even on the 5-year-old, when you teach a child to learn Torah, they say that there was, I think it was on the Gro, they say, that when in the room walked in the teacher who taught them Talmud, he didn't stood up for him. But when came in the teacher who taught him Aleph Beis, he stood up for him. So they asked him, well, this guy taught you much more. He says, no, the guy who taught me Gemara, now I'm looking at the Gemara, it's a different Gemara, it's not the one that he taught me. But the Aleph Beis is the same, so he's my teacher of the Aleph Beis. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he's teaching, yes, he spoke in a way we should be able to understand something, because if we would speak his language, we would know what is he talking about. He gave it to us, we should be able to swallow it, we should be able to understand it, but in these teachings, in every detail of his teaching was his understanding of it. And to reach that, you have to be able to start thinking the way he thinks. And that takes 40 years. Doesn't matter, you're the most talented. It's a depth, it's 40, there is many things. A mikveh is 40, wherever the mabel was 40, whatever, there's many, 40 is a thing that you have to go through it and only then you could get there. And that's what it says, that a real teacher, to understand them properly, takes 40 years. But 40 years means that you are learning is Torah the whole 40 years. Not that you heard and learned 5 years, and then 20 years you didn't, and then you came back. So you don't have the 40 years. It's 40 years learning his Torah. Okay?
Question.
Yes.
Moshe Rabbeinu didn't learn 40 years from Hashem himself. 40 days maybe, so that looks like it's not absolute rule.
It is absolute rule for us. Moshe Rabbeinu is in a different category.
How did he get to this category?
Moshe, he was born with that category. His neshama, when he was born, the whole house, even so he was born in the house of the Noseh Hador, who was Amram. Amram was the leader of the Jewish people, and he was born in that house. Obviously, the house of Amram had more light than any other Jewish home in Egypt. He was the leader, spiritually. And then the Chumash says, when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, a baby just born, the whole house was filled with light. Means his neshama just coming to this world, it was a light that in comparison even to the light of his father. Because he's the seventh, it's special, whatever. But I'm just saying is, it's these neshamas, they're learning differently. When they learn something, they take it the way it is right away. They learn it in the highest level. They don't have to go these steps and steps that takes us for years. Not just to understand it because of the brain, also to reach it with the neshama. The neshama is on a higher level, so Moshe Rabbeinu, first of all, Moshe Rabbeinu was 80. And he didn't become Moshe Rabbeinu when Hashem told him the first time, go and take the Jewish people out. He was already learning Torah for more than 40 years before. Where? In Egypt with his father. Then later when he ran to Choron, he was learning there alone. Hashem taught him Torah. Torah doesn't fix all the time Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to God. It only fixes when the message from God to Moshe Rabbeinu was important to us. That's what's recorded in the Torah. But when Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu communicate between them, without connection to the Jewish people, that stayed between them. That he didn't write it down to us. Anyway, Moshe Rabbeinu is not the one who needs 40 years. We do for this. That's why
application for us now. This rule.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Let's say I started it when I was 40, so until 80, I have a chance really to understand.
To understand the teachings of your teacher, the way it is. We're not talking it's just Chumash.
If you have 10 teachers, you don't understand anybody. Basically.
Okay, so I'll explain. I thought I explained, but I guess I didn't. We said this is a special teacher. It's not, you could call me a teacher, but that's not what we're talking about. I'm just translating and sharing what I heard before, yesterday or whatever, I learned it before, and I'm sharing with you. I don't understand this in a higher level. I'm sharing with you what I understand. This is we're on the same level. That's not the teacher. I'm saying a teacher like Moshe Rabbeinu, who understands it not in Pshat, he understands it in Ramesh, in Drush, and in Sod. He understands it actually what God had in mind in that idea. And to understand Moshe Rabbeinu's teachings, that takes 40 years. My teachings, you don't need 40 years. If you listen well, you got it. Or if I said something to the point, and if I said something I didn't understand myself, and you didn't miss anything. Between what? Understanding?
Moshe Rabbeinu means Rebbe, right?
Moshe Rabbeinu means Rebbe, that's correct. So when we're learning the Rebbe's teaching, when we're learning the Rebbe's teaching and we see the way the Rebbe learns Chumash and Rashi, explains everything in a different, and to understand him, that takes many years. That takes 40 years. I mean, I came to the Rebbe, I was 15. And I remember many things I didn't understand. It didn't make sense to me. Mine, level of understanding. Today I'm looking back and I started to see, still, whatever.
What was the intention of the Rebbe? Now we understand it after so many.
Now you understand, you not just understanding, you understand the level of his approach in learning of Torah, how he sees everything in Torah. And maybe we'll take another piece. It's not here. I spoke about this Shabbos by Mincha here, but here is a smaller crowd. We could chew it a little better to understand it. We are also, we finished.